Americans don't know how many children have died at the hands of their own parents. Officially, the cause was rarely linked to domestic abuse, and the high child mortality rate caused little social uproar. But in 1874, one story from the streets of New York became the turning point in the history of violence against children in America. It was the case of 10-year-old Mary Ellen McCormick.
There was brought to me the story of a little girl. For years, the child had been a prisoner, very frequently left alone the entire day, locked in an inner room. I saw a pale, thin child, barefoot in a scanty dress. It was December, and the weather was bitterly cold. Across the table lay a brutal whip, and the child's meager arms and legs bore many marks of its use. Her face was the face of a child unloved, that had seen only the fearsome side of life.
In the 1870s, no organization existed to which Etta Wheeler could turn for help. So in desperation, she turned to the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. On April 9, 1874, police arrived at the apartment, seized Mary Ellen, and brought her directly to a New York courtroom.
I saw a child brought in, at the sight of which men wept aloud. I saw it laid at the feet of the judge, who turned his face away.
My name is Mary Ellen McCormick. Mama has been in the habit of whipping me every day. I did not know for what I was whipped. I now have a cut on my forehead which was made by a pair of scissors. She struck me with the scissors and cut me.
The story of little Mary Ellen stirred the soul of the city and roused the conscience of a world that has forgotten. I knew where the first chapter of children's rights was being written.
Even though America now admitted to the problem of child abuse, the violence has continued for more than a century. In 1987, no one stepped in to save the life of 6-year-old Lisa Steinberg, even though neighbors had long suspected abuse. Hedda Nussbaum, Lisa's adoptive mother, was also a victim of Joel Steinberg's violent temper, and in the pattern that has gone on for centuries, never cried for help.
Do you recall the thought that I ought to get someone else's advice? This might be serious.
No, I trusted Joel.
Today, 1 in 5 homicides in America occur within the family. And in America, a child is murdered every 3 hours. Child abuse is increasingly recognized as one of the clearest of all contributors to violence in America. If the country is ever going to break the cycles of violence, it will first have to break the cycles of abuse.
When children feel unloved and they're not cared for, if they're treated violently, they're going to develop a lot of anger, a lot of frustration, and they're going to feel rage that they would like to take out on someone else in a society. I think now, as people move into the area to examine these things, we discovered that it's epidemic in American society.
In America today, neighborhood gun incidents make the Capone era and the Wild West seem tame by comparison. And half of all homicides are now drug-related. Because so much money can be made, drug dealing in the 1990s has become a deadlier version of what bootleg gin was to the 1920s. It's enormously profitable and enormously dangerous. Today, American violence is much the same as it always has been. We continue to repeat the mistakes of our ancestors. Their violent traditions have become our violent traditions. America still turns criminals into heroes. And just as it was in the days of the James brothers, this country continues its love affair with the gun. The media's obsession with violence has been escalating since the era of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. And it is still true today that violent poor people, fueled by alcohol and drugs, attack each other much more frequently than they attack the rich and privileged. Family abuse is still the primary way that violence is passed from one generation to the next. Of all the characteristics that define American violence, perhaps the most dangerous is this country's historic amnesia, its lack of memory when it comes to violence.
America has suffered from historical amnesia about a lot of issues, and violence is one. The fact that we're seeing a spillover of violence far beyond the most vulnerable members of a society into the middle classes and the upper classes, and the everyday violence is a very dangerous omen as to what awaits us in the 21st century.
Violence is learned, and because it is learned, it can be unlearned, but that can't happen until Americans deal with the roots of their problem. America offers the greatest hope and the greatest disappointment. Until this country takes the first step and sees the pattern of its violent traditions, Americans will be condemned to repeat them.